Uh, well, we want to continue the discussion on this issue of NG cares as we are looking at the result areas. Nigeria Cares, as we know, is a stimulus program, and it's a stimulus program that is meant just for 2 years. And there's a purpose for it, especially after the incident of COVID-19. So the project, like we have said, had about 3 result areas. And result area 1, the aim of result area 1 is basically to support government efforts in scaling up safety net services, especially safety net services that provide consumption and livelihood support towards increasing the number, support to the increasing number of poor people. And what are we trying to talk about? We know that NCARES is not a program that is just starting things afresh. It is based on existing programs that government have been doing before. It is to support those programs. So it's not that for the 2 years we are just starting something fresh, something new. It is existing programs that is going to support. And we know over the years that COVID-19 had affected us, had affected the nation, and we have even issues with our social safety net program even in the country before. And because most low income, medium supported income people, they have issues. And we have the issue of poverty even in Nigeria. And that is why we are saying this. So despite various social protection programs that have been launched in the last few years, we have a lot of issues before even COVID-19. And when COVID-19 came, it has escalated the issue in terms of poverty level among the people. So, but the Nigerian Cares, as we have said, is a P4R program. And P4R is talking about program for results. That means whatever be the outcome will be based on results. So, and there are key areas, like we have said, 4 key areas that we have 3 areas, but there are some specific areas that we regard as the DLIs, disbursement linked indicators, that we are going to talk about. And the intervention, government have been doing some things before, but we are talking about upscaling what government have been doing before. But it is not in all those areas where government have been intervening before that this project is going to intervene. So the intervention program is outlined in the table below, which you will see. And that makes us to see what government have been doing and what we are going to be doing. And that is why we are saying is program for results. And program for results is saying that we want to see what you have done. We want to see the output of what you have done. This program is not going yet to outcome level, but output level. At least let us see the investment, the input, what is the thing that has come out of the input. And it is on that basis that we are talking about the disbursement, reimbursement of whatever the government has spent. Before, now, yes, state government, even the federal government through NASCO in particular, we have done some things in terms of the social register. And the social register being in existence, we have the state social register, in some places that is the SSR. We have the state unified register of beneficiaries, that is the SRB. We have the unified register for the beneficiaries, that is those to the notice. But for this project is not going to address that. This project, those registers are already on ground. And it is those registers that will be used in some areas, not in all the areas, not in all the DLIs, but some some DLIs will be based on the register, which we are going to see as we go on specifically. Then we have the cash transfer program that is on ground before, and that is cash transfer for the poor and the vulnerable households. And also we have the livelihood support intervention, which have been in existence even by some government before. But what this project is going to do is to support it to go further. And that is why when we get there, we are going to see what we are talking about. And also, we have the labor-intensive public work. Yes, the labor-intensive public warfare is a program that has been meant for unemployed youth. We know in some states they have some program that relates to this. In some states they have the youth engagement program. In some states like Osho, I know they have the OES and some of those ones. But this time around, and also before, we have the public warfare, PWF, under the YESO project. But this one is talking about labor-intensive public warfare. And it's also going to be meant for the unemployed youth and the women. But they are going to be selected from the SSR, that is the State Social Register. And other beneficiary registers. If the state have any state, if they have some beneficiary register, they have a social register, they have a register that they have on their own before. Yes, it's acceptable, but it must be subjected to eligibility criteria by NASCO. NASCO must look at it and yes, it meets up with the expected and required criteria before it could be used. So it must get the approval of NASCO. Otherwise, in most states, we have the State Social Register, we have all those registers before. But I know some states will say, yes, we have our own register. There's nothing wrong, but it has to be validated by NASCO. And also, we have the livelihood support program that have been in existence in some states before. Some have this financial literacy program, some have personal initiative soft skill training program that they are doing before. But for the NG cares, what is going to happen is there's a program that is also livelihood support, and that will involve provision of training, that is training, soft skill training for those people, and also there will be grants for livelihood activities for economically active households and groups that are selected from the SSR or from the SRB or from acceptable validated state register that has been validated by NASCO. And then we also have the community and social development program in basic service infrastructure that have been going on before, and even the gender and the vulnerable program that is in existence before. Yes, this time around too, there will also be what we call the community and vulnerable group basic service delivery. And that will be a kind of provision of basic community-driven services in the areas, in the sectors. It is limited now, not in all sectors like we have been before. Before there were 8 sectors, but this one is going to affect only 4 sectors. And that is talking about in the area of health, in the area of education, in the area of water, and in the area of nutrition. So when we look at it, these are the basic ones that we have under area 1. That is, we are talking about result area 1, which we are still going to discuss further as we go along. And we talked about, I've told us that when we go along, we are going to see this one. And that is what we are talking about. And like we have seen there, I've talked about the state social transfer, which is categorically for the vulnerable household and individual, the aged people. We have talked about the livelihood support program. But let's look at the programs. Let's look at it in specific terms. The disbursement link indicator 1.1, which is the first one, DLI 1.1, under the result area 1. And that is the state social transfer. The objective of the state social transfer program is also to enhance consumption support for the vulnerable groups, especially the aged persons, people with disabilities, those who are chronically ill, and the urban poor household. Let us get it clear. Those ones that they are to support are clear, and the criteria is clearly stated. The aged persons with disabilities, the chronically ill, and the urban poor household. It is important for us that we don't go beyond all these specifics, because when we get to the independent verifiable agents protocols, you are going to see if we go beyond all this, there will not be reimbursement. So we have to work. That's why they call it disbursement linked indicators. They are specific indicators, and that means reimbursement will be linked to the result achieved and what we have disbursed, which will be related to all this. And the program, like we have, is going to be handled by the State Cash Transfer Unit, that is the SCTUs. In the states, we have the state cash transfer unit, and most of them, they have adequate staff. Some of them have the capacity and they have the training. That is why we are saying that this project is to upscale. It has been in existence before. It's not creating a new thing. So that's why the state cash transfer unit is going to handle this particular area. And where in any state this is absent, there is no state cash transfer unit, where it is being said that appropriate state agency that is currently implementing the cash transfer program in those states. There are some states that, yes, they have the cash transfer for the poor, for the vulnerable that they are doing. If in that state you don't have the state cash transfer unit under the arrangement that we have in existence before, but you have another viable unit that is responsible for it in the state and has the capacity, both the human capacity, both the knowledge capacity, and the experience, it is also allowed. And the beneficiaries of this particular social transfer scheme, they will be targeted, like I've said, using a clear objective and criteria, like we have spelled out initially. So when we look at this, what is going to happen is that the beneficiaries will be selected from the state social register or the state beneficiary register, or the register that is acceptable. But they must meet those criteria. They are aged people, the chronically ill people. Those criteria, we are going to use it when we are mining from the register. Like the social register that we are talking about, all these categories of people, they are there. And all the specified criteria are there. That when we are going to mine purposively, because these criteria are there, it is only those who meet this eligibility that we are going to mine from the register. And it should be noted that it's not allowed. We are not just going to be saying we want to register people afresh for this program or not. No, we are not registering any people afresh for this program. We are going to mine from the acceptable social register. I've said it before, we are using the social register, we are using the state beneficiary register, or any validated social register that is acceptable and is found to meet up with the criteria, which must have been validated by NASCO. And when we look at this, when we mine, we have to match the data of the beneficiaries receiving where the mine list shall be subjected to matching with the data of the beneficiaries receiving the federal government cash transfer and the public welfare beneficiaries of YESO program. So what we are trying to say is that there will be a way so that there will not be double dipping. It's going to be avoided. And like I said, even when we mine, it is necessary for us that when we even mine, we have to do the integrity test. That you have extracted even from that register does not mean it's absolute. That is why we are talking about the fact that we are going to create the NGPS register. And that is why when you mine, you still have to examine. We can do grant cheating. We can even still visit to confirm whether those people are still in that are still eligible. If somebody was clinically ill by the time that they are doing the CBT, or the time that they are getting them the verification for the register and everything, but it's okay now, or is out of that status. Maybe the person was a widow that time and was in critical position, but now is getting married, or something that happened one way or the other, that is supposed to have been exited from the register normally. So when we do our own due diligence, which is important for us, it will enable us to create. That's why they are saying we are going to create NCAS register from the mine list. And that means we have to do our own due diligence. And so that is what we are going to say. And when we look at this, those who are eligible for this program, like we have said, they are going to experience the cash transfer. And like we said, yes, they are going to be paid bi-monthly. But one key thing that is sure is that nobody is going to pay cash. They are going to be paid by the payment service providers. But in getting the service provider, it is important for us to get service provider that we know can meet up with the yearnings, that are able, that are capable. Because if they mess up, when the independent verification agent comes around and people begin to give one complaint after the other, it's going to affect us. So we must get people who will be able to meet up with the criteria, to meet up with the timing that will not bring any delay. And definitely, there's not going to be any payment that's going to be by direct cash. There are different modem and various ways by which the cash will be transferred. I mean, it can be the options, electronic payment, e-payment, using the money agency, using the mobile money, and various means. But one key thing, no physical cash is allowed, and we must get that one clear. And it is also necessary, like I said, that we carry out our due diligence on this. So when we look at all this, there are things that needed to be done. For the state cash transfer, there are a lot of things that relate to the indicators. The indicators are the pointers that shows whether a program is attaining what it's supposed to attain or has not attained it. And when the independent verification agent comes, these are some of the things that they are going to look at. Number of beneficiaries that have been enrolled for the state cash transfer by gender and vulnerability profile. The vulnerability profile is talking about the criteria we have listed about before. Clinically ill, we are talking about chronically ill, we are talking about the aged, we are talking about the widow, and all those criteria that we have listed. And also, number of beneficiaries with successful direct cash transfer payment. We are not talking of attempted. No, we are saying successful. That can be affirmed. Oh, I got this money at the right time. I got this money this. Oh, yes, this is it. Not that they will say, yes, we have not received. And when you go this out, but we have transferred it. Oh, it's not a problem. No. The verification agent will base everything. The indicator is those who have successfully received the cash payment. And then, number of beneficiaries with satisfaction records. That is, when the verification agent comes around, he's going to move around and ask. Yes, they will look at the record, but at the same time, they're going to interact with people. And then they're going to ask how many of them were satisfied. How many of them get the money bi-monthly, not a matter of in 3 months. That is critical. And then the percentage number of grievance redress mechanism cases that are treated. In the communities, we are going to have those who are focal persons for grievance issues. When there are conflicts, when there are this, they are going to be there. They are going to resolve issues so that we don't have complications and we don't have situations where people, beneficiaries, are complaining. So they are going to be there to address issues as it comes. And that is why how many cases were reported, how many cases were attended to, how many cases were resolved. So that is why our GRMs, we also have to be very careful to get good people who will be the GRM. And also the percentage number of beneficiaries with existing bank accounts. That is how many of them now, even now, have an account where they are getting the payment. That is also a kind of improvement in their social life. Those are some of the things that we are talking about. But what are the expectations of the state cash transfer unit? What are the things that they expect them to do? Well, they will be responsible for all the preparatory activities to launch the DLI, that is the deployment indicator for this result area 1. They are going to manage the beneficiaries' enrollment. They are going to provide the technical support that is required, and they are going to participate in information dissemination, mobilization of the community, and getting feedback where there are issues. And then they are going to ensure that social safeguards are in place. That is very critical. One of the things they are also going to do, like we have said, yes, we know verification will come every 6 months, but it is necessary for us to have a record. And so there must be very, very varied M&E process in place. And also, we must have a situation where the state cash transfer unit will implement grievance procedure framework that it has been designed, and also conduct a periodic review so that this can move on. And that's what we are saying. So when we look at this, there are some things that have to be performed. We are going to have the operation unit that is going to be responsible for monitoring. Let's go ahead and see other ones as we move on. Then we are going to have the finance unit. The finance unit is also going to see to it. Let's see what we are talking about. And the finance unit is going. The finance and the admin unit They are going to be responsible for the preparation of the monthly, quarterly financial reporting, and they are going to ensure adherence to financial management, because we talk about process evaluation, and that is what we are trying to talk about. Then we are also going to have the MIS, that is the Management Information System, that will be supporting all operations in terms of keeping of data, so that there will be accuracy of the data. That is important. The payment unit is going to be there. The MIE unit is also going to be there. And that is what we are trying to talk about. Now, like I have said, the cash transfer, they are getting the monthly of 5,000, but it's going to be paid bi-monthly. That means they're going to be paying 10,000 every two months. And we have talked about some of their rules. The DLI 1.2, the disbursement link indicator 1.2, that is the labor intensive public welfare. The objective of the labor intensive public welfare is to provide immediate employment opportunity in the social sector. That is to address the issue of emergency constraints that are arisen as a result of the pandemic. And this is going to involve issue of the unemployed and the unskilled youth and women from poor and vulnerable households. That is, from the state register, the social register that we have talked about, or when we are using the state unified register for beneficiaries, or whatever validated register that we have. Those that are going to be choosing, they are talking about unskilled youth, not the youth that has the work or that is skilled. No, unskilled youth, and then women who are from poor and vulnerable households, and their ages must be between 18 and 45 years. But one critical thing, I know some of us who have been involved in public welfare for PWL, the criteria may seem to be the same thing, yes, but they must also have some educational qualification. That is one of the things, and that is why they are saying they must have secondary school education or below, but they must have that one, and that is what is happening in the labor intensive. That is the criteria for the labor intensive public welfare. And we have said they are going to be chosen from the register. And some of the activities they are going to be involved in will include improvement of public spaces, which include the cleaning of the public area, like garbage, like refuse, like waste disposal. They are going to be involved in traffic control. They are going to be involved in rehabilitation of classrooms, public toilets, repairing of clinic and primary health center. But one of the critical things is that this time around, before they will work in any place, we are talking about the community-driven development. The community members must be involved. They are the ones who will be involved with all the people who are supervising. They will be able to tell them, this is the area of need in the community, and that is where they are going to fit in. That is where they are going to provide the labor to help. And the beneficiaries will receive stipend of between 10,000 and 20,000 every month. And there will also be reports that is deliverable every month. But it is stated, and it is possible, because the state has power. The state government, in accordance with the prevailing market rate, can decide to review whatever they are paying. They have the liberty. But what is being said is that the minimum is 10,000. So they have between 10 and 20,000 every month, and that will be paid every month. But the state government has liberty. In view of inflation and in view of prevailing market wage rate, they have the right to review it. That is the state government. So that means, and once the state standing committee approves representing the state government, it could be implemented. And that is what we are talking about. Now, because some people may want to say, oh yes, the minimum wage. Yeah, this is in agreement with the Minimum Wage Act of 2004, because the labor intensive public welfare is not a full-time work. It is on part-time basis. And that is why we are saying that they are not in contravention of the minimum wage. And the public activities where they are to be deployed, like I've said, is going to be demand-driven, reflecting what the community wants, what the community development association wants. Oh, our clinic is bushy. Oh, we are doing this work, and we have some of our people coming to work with us. So it's also CDD approach in terms of the activities they are going to be performing. And that is what we are saying. And like I've said, the method of paying those who are involved is going to be paid by the payment service provider. They can use local bank facility. They can use electronic delivery system. They can use debit card for it. And they can use the biometric smart card. And then there could be cell phone transfer, provided there's going to be evidence of transfer. But the stipend payment by direct cash to beneficiaries, either by government agency or by contractors, are not permissible. Like I said, there are a lot of risks that are bound. So today, there are different payment systems avoiding the risk of direct cash transfer. And it is being said we must be able to fit in and use it. Like we have said the other time, for the state cash transfer also. In the people will say, yes, it's a difficult area. But these days when you carry cash, there are a lot of problems. Even some of those beneficiaries from experience, they don't even want it because they will say people have known when they get it, they are even in danger. And some of them, they will not even be able to use it for what they need it for. People will come and beg, borrow money since they are aware, and it's not even safe. How do we transfer? So that is what we are talking about. I've mentioned some of the activities that they're going to be doing, like construction and rehabilitation of community roads, rehabilitation of water canals for irrigation, land clearing for irrigation scheme in those places that are foreign, and that is applicable, reforestation, gully reclamation, land husbandry and soil conservation method, and also they can help in construction of market stores for selling farm produce. That is why we are saying that there will be interwoven, like rehabilitation of small bridges, brick molding, rehabilitation of classroom or toilets. If we have synergy with those who are also in community and social development, basic infrastructural provision, some of the labor intensive people, public welfare people, can also assist. We are all under NCARES. There could be integration. We are all under NCARES. They could also assist. It's allowed because in some of these ones, and it's going to affect, help us in saving some costs and some application, which can be discussed later. And then, issue of traffic control, they can help in civil security unit. They can help also with maintenance of community peace and also public work. That is peculiar to each state. The state steering committee in each state have right to design some public work that they feel the people want to do. That means this eligibility list can be reconfirmed by the state steering committee, the state coordinating unit getting approval of the state steering committee that this are our own eligibility criteria. That's why we are domesticating the generic operation manual. And then, like I've said, all those people who are involved, they must be paid their money within 7 days. And also, it is expected, we say it's part-time, yes, but the beneficiaries are contingent to work for at least 4 hours for 20 days. That means if you don't work for up to 4 hours and you don't work up to 20 days, you are not eligible to full payment because they are going to sign. And when the independent verification agent comes, you want to see where they sign. And the community development agents, the community people will also sign to confirm that this work is being done. And so that is part of what we are trying to talk about. And the key strategies are clear, is to promote, the key strategies of the labor intensive public welfare is to promote sustainable livelihood of the people. Sustainable livelihood of the people. It is also to ensure environmental sustainability. It is to ensure that graduation of the beneficiaries. That means because some of them will still have opportunity even to be trained in some small skills that they can move into after they exited from this program. That is part of it. And it is also to promote gender equality and reduce vulnerability, because both are involved, both gender are involved, both the male gender and the female gender. And it's also to be able to mainstream the COVID-19 protocol. They are aware of it because they are going to wear the PPE when they are working. And it will also ensure accountability and transparency. So the functions of the labor intensive public welfare unit, we have said it, they are going to select the beneficiaries from the register, the validated register, yes, let's go. They are going to undertake enrollment, they are going to make provision for follow-up to ensure things are done, they are going to ensure monthly payment of stipend, which must be at most 7 days into the new month. At most, there must not be delay beyond that. But if the delay is beyond that one, when the independent verification agent come and they say we don't get it on time, you are violated and it may affect reimbursement. And that is part of what we are trying to talk about. And they are to manage the day-to-day activities, and they are to work with the local government area, and they are to carry out some activities in collaboration with the ministry, department, and agency, and they are to coordinate the transfer of materials. And also they are to prepare monthly reports. So when we look at this, these are the basic things that they need to do. And the operating cycle is there, I've said the verification and all this. So let's move on as we move on to see. We have talked about the enrollment and this. And then the deployment, I've said it, they are going to be assigned to what the community wants within their area, not just what we want. That is very, very important because it's CDD. And the activities they are going to do must also be gender focused. So then there's opportunity for life skill training. And that is what we are saying, is that they are also being empowered. They're going to be given some little training, some soft skills, that even after they exited, they can also go into it. And that is very, very important. And like we have said, the following options make the exit strategy possible. Number one, training and labor activation. In addition to the stipend being received, the training component is added so that the labor intensive public welfare prepares also the participant for the job market. That is, that training they have some vocational training and literacy that even when they exit after 2 years, they can go into this and then get some little job that they have learned from vocation that they have learned. And that is one. Some are into micro enterprise development. Well, they bring them up, they train them in some micro enterprise development that they can begin to do. And I know some also make contribution from the little that they earn so that they can go into some little business, micro business, and this. And then there are other existing such strategy. Some of them, like we have said, they form cooperative among themselves. They do savings, and somebody takes it, and then they use it to start some little business, little activity one way or the other. And like I've said, skill development is also part of what they are doing. Some of them, some states may decide to have taught some of them into the civil service, which is a good thing, and that's an exit strategy after some. And then there's local content policy. The states may develop their own policy of integration for this category of people. And I believe all this can help when the people exited. And that is what we are talking about in that one. So if there are any issue, we look at it. We have looked at the DLI 1.1. We have looked at the DLI 1.2. Later we proceed on to DLI 1.3, which is talking about the livelihood grants.